Hello, folks.
Hello.
I started that one with the wrong bit of video thing. I'm getting used to the new settings on WW1TV. Well, hello, folks. This is our Ask Us Anything. I've done 7 Ask Me Anythings on WW2 TV. We're now doing an Ask Us Anything on WW1 TV. How are you today, Lucy?
Yeah, not too bad. Just looking forward to a nice chat with everybody. Like, we're around a pub table and we're going to have a nice chat. Not just about World War I TV. Happy to talk about all things World War I always, but, get to know each other a bit as well.
Well, that's the plan, isn't it? Because some of the questions already are very, very heavy, which is great. But we want to have some lighter ones as well. So we've got a few people who've already left questions down. I know Lisa Loftus is having to go off and do something else. So she started off a couple of questions. So her first one is, can you recommend any first-hand accounts of memoirs from anyone in World War I? I have some already, but would love more. So that's over to you, that one, Lucy.
Oh, so many. I really feel like memoirs are a great way to access history, any history actually, but particularly First World War. I've got loads of favourites, but my top 3 are probably Some Desperate Glory by Edwin Campion Vaughan, and We Go On, which is all about, Canadian Will Bird. It's all about his kind of spiritual experiences in the trenches. Well, there's a large part of it's about that. That's very, very good. And PJ Campbell as well, recommend his memoirs. So yeah, but loads. And I find that, you take them with a pinch of salt, don't you? Because, it's a personal view is not always the best place to get your factual history. But that's how I got into military history in the first place, is through memoirs. They can be so powerful.
So I'm going to ask you a question, because I'm on the Great War learning curve. Is it fair to say that there are a lot more accounts from the First World War from people, I'm talking about the British, from British kind of upper class society, gentry officers, than there are kind of the ordinary guys? I mean, World War II, you get everything. You get, working class guys in the Chindits. But is First World War a bit different?
Yeah, I suppose I've never really thought about that, but I suppose now I think about it, yeah, I suppose there are quite a few from officers, but partly I suppose that's because in a way they had to document a lot more what they were doing, and they had their diaries to refer to post-war, whereas obviously that might have been lacking for some of the privates and whatnot. But there are plenty out there. I mean, I don't think, the thing to remember as well is that, after the First World War, actually this sort of society shifted quite a lot in Britain, and really more power to the working classes. So I think often we think it's all about the officers, and the private, and the lower ranks really kind of had a raw deal, and that's just not the case. So yeah, in terms of memoirs, there's a nice mixture out there, definitely.
Brilliant. And that reminds me of a subject we can discuss at some point on both channels, is what were the expectations of the people who fought in the war from different countries. My best mate Colin here, his grandfather wanted a better Britain. He wanted a more equal society. That's what he felt he was fighting for. Others were fighting because they were conscripted. Others were fighting for king, for country. And around the world, it'll be different reasons. And I wonder whether, well, obviously people have written about the differences between the two wars, but I wonder whether that's something, a subject we can discuss, what the majority of people thought they were fighting for at the time, and whether or not they changed what they said they were fighting for as the years passed afterwards. What's your feeling on that, just as I threw that to you right there?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that all comes back to morale, right, as well. It's a key factor in keeping morale high is your reasons for fighting. And as you say, it varied person to person. I think we have to be very careful when we kind of discuss anything like that about using, generalizations and broad brushstrokes, but you can pretty much put it into themes, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to, one of the key reasons why I'm really looking forward to doing World War I TV is to dig into the sort of social, cultural aspects of things rather than just the military, just sticking to the military stuff. Sorry, Paul.
No, I just said that definitely. So let's do another heavy one, then we can go to some lighter ones. So Lisa again. As we know, World War II increased the economy and put many to work in factories. How much does the World War I affect industrialization? Now, again, that would depend on which country we're talking about as well. But in terms of Britain, I mean, surely it was a massive, great industrialization or continuation of the industrialization because of the Industrial Revolution having been fairly recently. Is that am I right on that?
Well, yeah, obviously, as we entered a period of total war, and the war industry spun up, there was a huge, demand for labour. Industrialization grew. A lot was pumped into industry, but after the war, there was the slump. And a huge rise in unemployment. The economy in Britain and most other nations was on its knees. So it was, off the edge of a cliff. And of course, we know the 1920s. The Great Depression in the US and various other things, as this big war machine and this big, huge international conflict wound down. So the effects on industry, it really, yes, during the war, and certainly these led to other things, had other sort of knock-on effects. So, women, for example, found themselves in some respects in a much better position in terms of the, work, and obviously got the vote as well in December of 1918, if you were over 30 anyway. But it wasn't like, yes, industry grew and then after the war, whoa, off you go. That wasn't how it was at all.
And thank you. And then there's that interwar period, because Ian McGregor was on WW1TV TV last week talking about the factory systems out in Stalingrad as being a model city of the new Soviet empire, and modeled on Henry Ford. Lots of initiatives taken from what the US was doing. So US's production that cranked up in the First World War then affected the Soviet Union, what they were doing then in the interwar period that then moved into World War II. So again, these are subjects that we're linking the two wars, and we're linking social history and military history, and I think that's where we're kind of excited about what we're doing with this. So let's do an easy one now, because you like your touring as well, Lucy. So Andreas is asking, what's your favorite First World War site to visit?
I feel like people ask me this question quite often, and I don't really have a standout favorite, because I feel like everywhere you go, it's always so emotional. Every single War Grave Commission cemetery, and I do love visiting War Grave Commission cemeteries, wherever I am, small ones, big ones, but all of those have personal stories in, and it's that really, for me, that's what drove me into studying the First World War and military history. It's the personal stories, and wherever you go, you find those connections, and it's always slightly different. So, but in terms of sort of wow factor, you've got to mention Vimy, the Vimy Memorial. That is somewhere where, every time I go there, it takes your breath away. And I would definitely recommend that as like a must-stop place for anybody visiting the Western Front. But really, I feel like it's such a personal thing, visiting the battlefields, that you almost have to just go out and explore and not say, oh, I'm not going to visit that because, that's not in the guidebooks, but take your time to find out for yourself, because all of these places, bore witness to some very profound things, and it's those feelings you get, yourself, Paul, when you're guiding. That we were saying before. Sorry, I switch between calling you Woody and Paul, and I've never settled on it.
Most people haven't. I do emails where sometimes I sign them Woody, sometimes I sign them Paul, and then they email back Woody, and I think, oh, did I sign that one Paul? I don't care. or you is fine as well.
Yeah, you.
And what you said about Vimy there is interesting, because I think that's definitely going to be something that we'll tackle maybe in the first week of shows, about visiting battlefields, because I know some Canadians. I was with Sam Cowan last week, and she takes groups there, and she's beginning to not dislike Vimy Ridge, but it is getting so crowded, and so the logistics of visiting it are changing and have been over the years, and therefore does that lessen the emotional response. We get the same thing in Normandy with the American cemetery, particularly that has half an hour and more queues of cars getting in. It can't help but change people's attitude and sort of dilute a little bit the reaction they're going to get because of just sitting in traffic like you would to go to work or something. So that's something we can discuss, about whether or not there's a similarity between the First and Second World War sites in terms of the big sites, the most famous sites being more popular to visit than the other sites. That's something definitely we can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are so many debates that go on about, certainly with places like the Menin Gate, and how maybe the ceremony that takes place there, how that's changed over the years. I have my views on it, and I know that other people have completely opposite views, and it's some of the issues, they're very sensitive, they're very emotive, and it can be quite a contentious debate around the shape of the battlefields and how they're changing, how we're educating, and also, how we're going to connect with the next generation, right? Because they look at things in a different way and they use different formats to access this stuff. So how do we make sure that these sites, these battlefields are preserved, but also remain relevant to those people? Because that's really the point of them, right? It's the future.
Yeah. Well, we had the same conversation with Andrew Biggio last night on the channel about his book, The Rifle, and about how memorials in the future might be both a stone item at a location, but also be a virtual memorial where people can go and contact each other online and leave. We know that it's possible to go and lay wreaths or lay cards or poppy crosses, but maybe people would want to do that in a virtual environment and engage with people who visited there. And so I think you're right there. Embracing how we're going to share history with people younger than us and in the next generation is really interesting. I think something we want to tackle on both channels. So that's something. So that's good. We ought to talk a little bit about World War I TV and what we're going to do. So this question here, we're probably not going to be able to answer it yet because we're still working this out. But the Great Dominion, who's a big World War II TV supporter, what do you expect the pacing and the timing of the shows to be on World War I TV? I.e., how many shows per week? What time of day? And will the live streams be on? Can't conflict with World War II TV. So we're still discussing this, aren't we, really, Lucy? But you're going to start with a slightly softer approach than I am, aren't you?
Yeah, look, I am not Woody, and I cannot commit the crazy amount of hours that he puts into World War II TV. Not through lack of wanting to do it. It's just I have other work, unfortunately, that would stop me from doing that. And I want to make sure that every show we do is top quality. I don't want to just put loads of filler in there just to keep up with with getting so many shows out a week or a month. Because for me, that's not what I'm in this for, right? I'm in this for doing the good stuff. So I think, I'm going to aim to try and do like one show a week and go from there, really. But it all depends, because I want this to slot in. We both want this to slot in with World War II TV so much, and the themes that I think we're going to play it by ear, to be honest. We're going to see, as well, what we've said from the beginning is we want you guys to be part of this and see where we go. So we're both pretty chilled about it, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, certainly in terms of timings, we're thinking that if there's a show on the same evening, I might do mine a bit later, you might do yours a bit earlier, but that might be if we're tackling a similar subject on the same day or in the same week, or we might have a World War I week and a World War II week following. We're working on how it goes, folks, because there's a lot of commitment into doing this, and I've got more spare time, and I've kind of got into the rhythm of doing things, and so we're working on that, folks. So definitely there will never be two shows clashing completely at the same time. That's something we can definitely say won't be happening. There might be consecutive shows, or there might be me one night, you the next night, but I don't think they'll ever clash, will they?
No.
Well, we're saying that now. They're not going to clash. So this is an interesting one because that we spent a few days together going to San Diego. So, hello, friends. Can you share a bit more about the Society of Military History and how it all got together, and what did you think of the conference overall? Well, I can't speak much about the Society because I have only been a member for the year up until this year, and I think the same for you, Lucy. But we can talk about how we found the conference. So do you want to start off by what it was and what you got out of it?
Yeah, firstly, hi Frank. I've noticed your username there. I have actually been a member of Society of Military History for longer, and really enjoy their journal. And it's a really nice way to connect with, for me, other sort of people working in your field from an academic point. But what I found really awesome about the conference was just the fact that, I was a bit worried because I'm like, well, I haven't got a PhD, and I was, I didn't kind of know what people would make of that. And academic conferences are not really my bag. But there was such a broad range of people there, and it was so nice to get an international view of military history because, I'm not going to lie, I find the UK scene can be pretty draining at points. It's, particularly, on social media, and you get in a little bubble, and it grind you down a bit, actually. And it was so wonderful to see there's this whole other world out there, these people doing amazing work internationally, and not just, not just from an academic point of view, but just working in fields connected to history. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it to people, even if you're, not, working in academia or whatever. That's kind of like neither here nor there. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I really enjoyed the fact it was a much more diverse group of people attending and speaking than perhaps I thought it was going to be. I was expecting lots of middle-aged guys, and there were quite a few middle-aged guys, but there were lots of other people from outside that demographic. So I really enjoyed the fact that it seemed to be forward thinking. It didn't seem to be stuck in the past, and the range of speakers. I mean, the number of events that were on at any one time was mind blowing. Sort of 12 or so different talks happening at the same time. So I mean, I didn't attend half the ones I wanted to. But no, I really had a good time, and the flight was long getting there. But next year it's on the East Coast, so it'll be considerably easier to get to for us from Europe. But no, I enjoyed it. I made some good contacts there, and enjoyed catching up with people that I'd had as guests on World War II TV, but never actually met physically. The joke being, everyone, when you've only seen them on Zoom or World War II TV, is that you have legs as well. People have only seen me from there to there, but I'm a living, walking human being. So no, I enjoyed it, and they're all very different. I think we have Wayne's Festival and Chalk Valley. I've done things in France with the Battlefield Guides Association here. I've done things they're all. There's a sense of the fact they're all talking about history in some capacity, but they're very different, and the way that it is conveyed, I think, is very different. But I'm all for more of these things. I'm hoping to get more invites to these kind of things.
I think just picking up on something you said there, is just this: we have this habit of like, oh, that's for these people, this is for you, and actually, we need to kind of move past that a bit, like these events are for everybody. If you've got an interest in military history, I think we kind of need to break down those walls a bit between, this idea that academic conferences and then things like We Have Ways, actually that we are all into this subject because we are passionate about it.
No, that's right. I mean, it's like, I know people who deliver pretty much the same lecture to a group of academics as they would to a group of school kids, or they would at a pub conference. The information is the same. The number of people moving forward and advance remains consistent. The time it started off is the same thing. The commander is the same. The conclusions are the same. So I think there's a bit of a annoying thing about this separation between an academic conference and a popular history event. And to me, they're all the same thing. They're all about imparting knowledge via someone who knows what they're talking about to an audience. And I don't see there's a certain way that academic conference has to function for its purposes, but beyond that, I think they're all very similar. And being a tour guide is very similar as well. You're also conveying information to an audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we'll go look at some more questions then. So we're looking at what Rabid Razorback. I'm hoping you will explore this in some depth, but why do you think the First World War seems more psychologically scarring, particularly in Europe, than the Second World War? I mean, I'm not sure that I agree with the premise of the question in some ways, but Lucy, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that either. But I think this comes back to something we mentioned in the last show, or one of the last shows, about how there is this idea in Britain particularly that like the First World War was the bad war and the Second World War was the good war. And a lot of this just comes down to the impact of many of the memoirs actually, that were written post-war. A lot of the poetry and the things that we educate, certainly a lot better now, but that we used to educate our kids with solely, at school, that you learn about it, the Blackadder effect, that kind of thing. And actually, yeah, I don't know if that is the case. I think actually, both First and Second World War had hugely horrific, long-lasting consequences, and I don't see a greater distinction as some people do. But that's just my opinion.
Maybe it depends on whether or not one counts the Holocaust as part of the Second World War studies, or want them, because that's been a debate of the last couple of years, as whether museums treat the Holocaust as one subject and the battlefield narrative as something, or whether, I'm of the opinion it should all overlap, because because the policies, the Nazi policies of what they were doing on the Eastern Front militarily were derived from and influenced how the Holocaust was carried out. So to me, you can't separate them. But if
me neither.
Thinking of World War II from the point of view of the battlefields only, then maybe the First World War is perceived to be more
I think,
I don't know.
Well, I think that the one big factor, I suppose, is that, the First World War was the first big industrialized war with things that, a type of warfare, mass killing and maiming and that kind of thing. And we look post-war, we've got the birth of modernism, all this kind of people questioning what is this all about, and this huge kind of internal conflict that people were suffering as a result of this new horror, essentially. So there is perhaps that kind of leans into it a bit. But I think, more broadly, if we're talking about today, our views on it, I think so much has been influenced by things that were written, particularly, in and around the 1960s.
No, definitely. And I think the subject of the war poets came up as well. And I think that in my head, I think of the Charlie's War is a comic that covered the Great War. But I think of comics as a kid was how I accessed World War II, but war poetry was how I was given the First World War. So it was completely two different ways.
Oh, that's interesting.
I never had, I never saw First World War as a fun war when I was 10 years old. World War II was a fun war when you're 10 because it's all about pretending you're in a Spitfire pilot, Spitfire flying over the channel in 1940, or you're chasing the Africa Corps out in the desert, but. From my point of view, the age I am, I felt definitely that the First World War was the serious one and the one to think about poetry and poppies and things. World War II was fun. And I think probably there's people of similar age to me that maybe have that same reference. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I'm looking forward to digging into that kind of thing as well. And just also, just one last point on that is actually how that changes depending on where you're from in the world and the different national flavors in how we deal with remembrance and that kind of thing, because it's not all the same.
No, definitely. What are our thoughts on World War I movies? So that's a sort of slightly not lighter question, but it's more about media. I'll hand it over to you first. So there's the Jeff Brayton is suggesting Paths of Glory, Sergeant York, and the original All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, All Quiet on the Western Front, the original, fantastic. I think actually, I know that things like 1917 and more recent movies, can be very divisive among, not just among the public, but among military historians in particular. But my view has always been that anything that gets people engaged in the topic is a good thing, and it doesn't have to be 100 million % factually accurate. I'm not really worried if people have the wrong buttons on their tunics and things like that. If the broad themes are suitable, essentially, because for me that's a big thing, right? Watching TV shows is a valid form of educating folks, and films. If you can educate via entertainment a little, and somebody might go away and pick up a book as a result, then that's a great thing. And I don't. That being said, there have been some shockers, but I kind of think, we have to be careful not to sort of be too nitpicky. Otherwise, these things would never get made if it was down to some people.
I was with Colin at the pub at the weekend and with a couple of friends. We were talking that the military crowd, which I include myself as, and as part of it on Twitter, we all want war films to be made. There's always people say, there's always one of those questions. What if you had unlimited money? What war film would you make? And people always suggest their favorite battle, their favorite regiment. We all want there to be more World War II or World War I content. And then when it comes along, we grumble about it. We say, "Oh, the hat wasn't right. They've got too many. It was clearly filmed in the wrong place." And why did he? So the producers of these films must think, well, why do we bother trying to please the military crowd? Because they're never happy. So, and clearly, they're not having production meetings where they say, look, let's think about that 1% of people out there who will notice whether or not it is the correct button on the tunic. They're looking at the demographics of how many people will go and pay money to see it in movie theaters and cinemas, how many people will buy it on Blu-ray and DVD. That's what they're thinking about, the 1% of us. I don't think comes into it. But I mean, Paths of Glory is my favorite First World War movie. Although I did really enjoy the fairly recent Journey's End from about
yeah,
4
that
or
was
5
really
years ago,
good.
Stephen Graham, because I just love Stephen Graham. I don't know him, but I'm really good friends with one of his really good friends, so I kind of feel I know him, and I think he's one of Britain's greatest actors of the current era, and anything he is in is elevated by him being in it. The Tom Hanks Greyhound movie was elevated by Stephen Graham, and so I enjoyed that. But if enjoying a grim movie like Journey's End is the right word.
Yeah, that was really good. I guess I'm a bit. I don't actually watch a huge amount of war films. I mean, I just don't like. I find like they just make me horrendously sad. So I think maybe because I spend a lot of time, reading and writing and things about it. I just need my entertainment is like crappy comedies, and fantasy stuff.
I have to do every now and then go and put something ridiculous on, like Dumb and Dumber or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or something, just to get away from World War II for a bit. So this is an interesting question because it's back to the subject of what we're talking about. Has the new channel seen interest from potential guests, for example, Prit Buttar? So I will answer that by yes. And yes, in case of Prit Buttar. And I mean, for every time I put something on Twitter, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I've got to pass them on to you as yet, Lucy, but I've had emails of people saying, I can put you in touch with historians here, there, and everywhere. And I think we definitely want to get away from this idea about it being just the Western Front and just the red trouser, tweed wearing British middle-aged guys talking about it. We really want to cover the whole of the conflict from different perspectives. So have you got some feedback already, Lucy, since you've announced yourself as co-host?
To be honest with you, we've got some really good people lined up for the first few shows, and I'm really kind of excited to announce those because, as you say, it kind of leans into this idea of moving away from what you traditionally might think of as World War One. Look, I think there's been some great work done over recent years to kind of diversify how we look at the First World War, and I know that there are some great resources on YouTube as well for the First World War, but this is something different, and I'm really excited to get as many people who want to come on and share their work, whether you're, working in academia, whether you've written a book, whether you're just a complete nerd about a particular topic. It's giving people that platform. So yeah, I mean, I've had lots of people saying, I'd really love to come on. So yeah, it's heartening. I'm taking this, a day at a time, really, and seeing how it's going. I'm new to this as well, right? So I've got big shoes to fill with you, Woody, and to live up to with World War II TV.
But yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, we're going into this both excited, but also feet firmly on the ground. Is that it's going to have to find its audience and find it, where it's going to run its course, because it'll be, as we said in the launch shows, it's going to be similar to and taking a lot of initial suggestions from how I've been doing things here, but then it will take its own course as you mold it, and indeed the audience, which will have some overlap, but also will be a slightly different audience who will tell us what they want. Again, World War II TV was entirely accidental. It was a lockdown project. It was just me literally calling upon mates and making things up as I went along in terms of the content. And now the fact I'm doing theme weeks is something that I would never have considered at the beginning. So, and Walter is saying about, are there guests from Germany and France in the shows? He liked the memoirs from Louis Bartas. Now, again, that's something I particularly want to talk about because living in France as I do, okay, the First World War sites are a little bit up the road from me, but the struggle I have in World War II is finding French historians who are comfortable enough speaking in a second language. They all speak English, by my consideration, really, really well, certainly better than I speak French. But they will say, oh, I don't feel that my English is really, really good enough. And I keep telling them that it is, but I'm sure we definitely want to. We definitely want to have French, Belgian, German historians. I know we've got a few contacts between us, but that's definitely an area we want to explore. And Turkey as well, Turkey and other countries.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to learning, broadening my horizons as well, just from a selfish perspective, because there is so much that I don't know that, it's going to be really great to get these people on and kind of dig into things with you guys watching.
No, definitely. So 2 questions from the same viewer. Any plan to extend out to other wars in the 20th centuries? And I'm going to say right now, no, but then I would have said that same thing about the First World War 2 months ago. So I don't know. I mean, if someone contacted me, maybe. But the follow-up question is, which channel will cover the interwar period? And again, this is going to be both, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be coming at it from different sides, and hopefully overlapping. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, well, that's how I see it. I mean, again, it's this whole idea of connecting the subjects. So certain areas, either via the nation, or via commanders, or via the area that the battle was fought in, or via themes such as aviation or industry or the civilian experience. So yeah, the interwar period will be covered as it feels appropriate to be covered. The end of a First World War show and the beginning of a Second World War show, or indeed some kind of overlapping thing, or one that we stream to both. We can do that like this. We could like our first launch, we could stream to both channels at the same time, which would be interesting.
Yeah, it'd be quite cool to do like a into a week or something like that. Like there's loads of options, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. This is one for you, Lucy. In your opinion, were there other campaigns that went as bad as the Gallipoli campaign?
Well, probably in terms of the scale of it, no. I reckon, part of the reason why, well, there are many, many reasons, but I think when you pack in the environmental problems and the supply problems and the rest of it on top of Gallipoli, that kind of is the nail on the coffin in terms of, take away all the kind of the strategic arguments and all the rest of it. The environmental factors for me make that possibly, the reason why it's the worst campaign. I know that we are, well, hopefully we'll be digging into Gallipoli a lot with some experts that I'm sure you guys will know. And I'll kind of leave the details to them, but my perspective, no, Gallipoli's up there as the biggest disaster.
But definitely ripe for a re-evaluation, just as the Somme is, just as in World War II, just as D-Day is, Market Garden is. We have not finished with our understanding of those particular campaigns. There's always new ways of framing those studies and looking at it from different points of view, and people are going out there and they're doing more archival work and they're walking the ground and things. So, we had a couple of comments on about on the YouTube last week about was there room for another First World War channel on YouTube, and but you could ask this, is there room for another, as you said before going live, another Churchill biography, or another D-Day book, or another book about dam busters, or another book about von Richthofen, the Red Baron? I mean, you can say yes, you can say no. I mean, most of these books bring something new to the table, don't they?
Yeah, and look, part of the job of historians is just to be re-evaluating things. And Gallipoli, there's some big old debates, and there are a lot of things that haven't been even explored the first time round yet. Particularly the Turkish perspective, there is a huge amount of work still to be done there, just because it has been various different reasons. It has been very difficult to lack of primary sources and things like that. But there's always room for conversations. I think the moment we say no, everything's full, and we've finished that, then probably that's the point when we start becoming poor historians, in my view. Like I said before, even if you have a viewpoint and that's you'll think, right, I'm 100% on that, it's always worthwhile staying open to hear what the opposite argument is, because someone might come up with something and you think, I've never thought about that before.
This is a really good one that could be rephrased in two different ways. Sean Bennett is saying, when would you define the end of the Great War? So much fighting in Central and Eastern Europe post-armistice and the beginning of post-colonial conflicts, Irish independence, etc. And the same, that then dovetails into when would we agree on the starting point of World War II? Because the Sino-Japanese War is now being talked about a lot more. So, we have 18 and 39 as the dates that end and start. But what's your take on those two questions, Lucy?
Well, of course, you've got, technically Versailles obviously the Treaty of Versailles wasn't signed till June 28th, 1919. So, there's that. But, there are all these different theories. You've got the one war theory, haven't you? You've got the theory that actually the First and Second World War are a continuation of the same conflict. It's not one I particularly agree with, but it's very difficult, isn't it, to put an end to such global things that have such a knock-on impact. And, you drop a pebble in a stone and the ripples go on, infinitely. and particularly after the First World War, as I mentioned before, with the kind of the philosophical impact of it, I think, and how that forced people, leaders, politicians to reevaluate some things and grapple with some things that were very new and difficult to deal with, and the impact that had. So yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure that I have a definite answer. I think for research purposes, you have to put a finite date on it. Then we go with the armistice, the cessation of fighting in the majority of places, and then Versailles as a kind of full stop on things. But that's just not the case. There are, where there's a rule, there are like a dozen exceptions, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And comments about they'd like to hear more about the Eastern Front, and we've had suggestions already for bringing Prit Bitar on, and David Stahl, and other people who've covered both wars, and then MRK. Will you cover the Russian Revolution at all on this channel? Well, again, probably not directly, but how can you talk about the Russian involvement without talking about the revolution? It's.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question for you there, Woody, about are the roots of Vichy connected to the devastation of France in World War One? What do you think about that?
I think the answer is it's got to be yes, isn't it? I mean, the everything about this is the whole point of the discussions we had about doing this channel, is that everything in 1939-40 goes back to the First World War. I mean, the generation that went off in 1939, the BEF, were all aware of what their fathers, their uncles had done. This is in a British perspective, but also Australian, Canadian, New Zealand, and in the Empire perspective. Whereas the 1914 PAL battalions, the wars previously had been, well, very just as devastating, but very, very different. They were professional armies going to so. That would be an interesting show in its own right. What was the attitude of a Tommy in 1914 and a Tommy in 1939, and the same for a Canadian in those two eras? And because they must have gone into 39 knowing what their dads and uncles had done, and their mothers as well in the factories and all that. Yeah.
I think that link, there's a lot of discussions about how that links to the political decisions that were made, in the late 30s as well, because there was this idea of this desperately trying to avoid, almost a focus too much on the past, of trying to avoid a repeat of things rather than actually thinking about the present and the future implications. Almost, it's kind of like you spend so much of your time trying to avoid or not end up in the same situation that inevitably you do. There's all that kind of side of it as well that's got to come into play, right?
Yeah, and Ian Carr, the Maginot Line. I mean, there's another thing that directly connects the two wars in policy, aims, doctrine. But yet is the interwar period. So again, would we do that in a First World War show or a Second World War show, or both? I mean, these are the discussions and the questions we will have to ask ourselves, and it's fascinating to get into it. So let's throw a couple of questions up as we're getting into things. So World War II TV, in addition to authors, has discovered various really interesting blogs and websites. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I will be pushing Lucy to work on, is not just bringing in historians from the worlds that we already know. That in mine and Lucy's case, we know people from the touring, the battlefield touring world. We know people from the circuit, but there are these people out there who have blogs or websites that need to make contact with us, and we need to make contact with them, because what's your opinion on bringing people in from outside of the worlds we normally exist in?
Like the more the merrier, and I think as I've kind of said previously, like having people share their views on things that maybe they've come to military history from a different route, from not a traditional route. Then you bring your life experience with it, right? And you bring your other interests with it. I was not into, just to make this all about me, I was not into military history from a very young age. I came to it, when I was maybe like 18, 19, something like that. But I didn't do history GCSE, didn't do history A-level, kind of left it for a while, went away, did some other jobs, and I brought my other passions into it. And I think you can end up having views that are so much richer by more diversity, not just in where people are from, but by their life experiences. So I would never, turn my nose up or underestimate the people who have dedicated their time to their specific point of interest, because they're going to know a million times more than I ever will about that particular subject.
Well, I definitely, and I think one of the things, the advice I will pass on to you is that it'll be as important as it is that the host has knowledge and background and understanding of the broad. Is let the guest, who has, as you say, spent the time working on that subject, take the spotlight, take control, because they're the ones who have done the groundwork on this. None of us, not any of us, can possibly have studied these conflicts in complete detail. That's why bringing in someone who has spent their life. I mean, I'm thinking on World War II TV, the people who, literally 25 years studying the Alamo Scouts, for example, or the 11th Armored Brigade, Division Rifle Brigade. That's that my friend over there. These people have literally given their lives to one unit or one aspect. So the First World War must have those similar people.
Yeah, definitely, and it's when you bring everybody together that's where you get a really rich resource, right? Because that's the whole point of having this kind of channel and this kind of community, is that you're not expected to know it all. There's no possible way one person can, but bringing all that together and sharing.
Yeah, brilliant. So a lighter question from Susan Yu, my friend Susan. Lucy, what do your husband and dog think about your new endeavours?
Well, my dog is obviously not pleased, because it means less time with her, and she is incredibly needy. And I'll be doing these shows from upstairs in my office, and she's not allowed upstairs, so she'll be very upset about the whole thing. My husband, I think, has the best will in the world, just given up with Min, that he's lost me to military history. So supportive, happy for me, but also just like, oh, okay,
Yeah. Well, that's a good, honest answer there. And this one, I think, is up for you, Lou. Your kind of focus. Gary asking, any shows planned on the contemporary history of Germany of the time? For example, could World War I be seen as inevitable after unification of Germany after Franco-Prussian War? Well, this is to understand World War II, you have to go back to the First World War. To understand the First War, you have to go back. It's Russian dolls, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, that we were, when we first sort of started chatting about this idea, we were saying you kind of you find a conflict that you're interested in, and then you tend to either go forward a bit, but you always end up going back a bit eventually. Like, that's always the way it goes. So yeah, I mean, as we've kind of said, I think we've pretty much covered this in the fact that I want to get people who have that experience in, that not just keeping it Britain focused, not just having it Western Front focused, and not just having it purely military focused, but actually looking at the drivers. I mean, the beginnings of the First World War, you could do like 6 months worth of shows just on the various debates as to what triggered the First World War, the factors. There are so many different theories, there were so many different things at play. It wasn't just Franz Ferdinand got shot. I think that's been distilled down way too simply in terms of our popular culture and what we think about it. So I'm really 100% going to do like a series of shows on sort of trigger points and start of the war, definitely.
And someone's suggesting an episode on military dogs. Well, as long as you can get horses and pigeons in for Frank as well, that would be. But dogs, yes.
100%. I told you I would 100% just do a channel just on animals, but nobody would watch it. They'd be like me, and Frank would watch it, and a few other people. But yeah, I'll be getting in as much animal content as possible.
But I mean, it's important. I mean, it's part of it. I mean, I learned so much from you and the Burma show about the mules, and I knew they were there, but the numbers, and I've had Niels Henkermans on talking about the horses in the German army, and I knew there were some, but I had no idea it was 2,000 plus per division in Normandy. So animals. There's Frank's comment there. Pigeons, yeah, and Frank has offered to come on and talk about pigeons in the First World War. I think it's just a standing open invitation to talk about pigeons. Anybody who'll listen. Yeah, so that's Frank who organised the Society of Military History for us over there. So that was good. So there's some very serious questions still. So we'll do a couple with them. Do we plan to discuss African actions? Well, yes, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like, all these questions that, do you plan to cover this? Do you plan to cover that? Yes is the answer. We want these ideas. We want you to tell us what you want. That's going to drive where we go with this. You've heard from us our aims. We want it to be international. We want to look at as much as possible, and we want to cover things that you maybe don't know or haven't heard much about before. We want to look at that, and we want to try, and we will find people. If you've got recommendations, hook us up, let us know. But I'm quite dogmatic. You give me something you want to know about, I'm like a dog with a bone. I'll go off and I'll between me and Woody, we'll find out the best people and endeavour to get them on for you.
Okay, thank you. And while we're waiting for a few more questions from the viewers, I'm going to throw one to you. As someone who does both wars and other periods as well, are there more myths surrounding the First War or the Second War, or is it about equal? I mean, are there certain things that always get talked about with the First World War more so than the Second World War?
From my perspective, I'd say yes, more First World War. But I don't know if that's just because probably I've studied or I'm much more sort of involved in that conflict than my studies in the Second World War. I think a lot of it, as I've said before, kind of seeps back to these things that seem so ingrained in our culture, just the idea that we wear a poppy, on Armistice Sunday, all of this kind of stuff. That for me, certainly it's a far heavier and a far more fairly destructive mythology around the First World War, that I think does a great disservice to actually the many people that perished during the conflict, because we very much risk this. Let's remember. We very much risk actually forgetting what we're remembering, and we're just parroting the same things over and over. I know we spoke about this, but and I know a lot of people who were deeply involved with the centenary and what was going on in popular media and TV and radio and such like at that time. A lot of people felt quite gutted about the coverage because it was the same old to a degree. And we spoke about my kind of experience with trying to get TV shows commissioned that are anything other than Somme and Ypres and Lost Generation and anybody who went and fought in the First World War died. It's trying to break those things is very difficult, and I think that does a disservice because we're not remembering things properly. And so how can that be a good thing?
No, definitely. I mean, I always, Taff Gillingham, I have known for 30 years, literally since he was called David. I always made a joke that I knew him before he was called Taff. And, and he met and interviewed hundreds of great war veterans, a lot of whom from Suffolk, Norfolk, and around where he said it was in many ways the best time of their lives because they had meals, comradeship, they felt they were doing the right thing. And we are burdened with this, everybody living in trenches, and it was rats, and but we all love Blackadder goes for the fourth series, but it has done as much harm as it has good in terms of understanding that. And I think we're not as surrounded by First World War media as we are World War II. World War II is video games as well. It is comics. It's there are many more movies and multimedia things about the Second World War than there are the First One. And what stuff, you're right, we have from the First World War is a little bit cliched and the PALS battalions and again we're talking about it from a British perspective, but I think Brad, who's watching, Vimy looms large in Canadian history, but of course there's lots more than just Vimy.
That I'm sure we'll get Brad on, and I've got a bunch of awesome Canadian historians in mind to discuss why Vimy was not the birth of a nation and all this kind of stuff. There's these mythologies, as I said, they're not just British based, but the ones in Britain are particularly, just from my experience, and I can only obviously speak from my personal experience, it feels to me a lot of the time that we're paying lip service to going through the motions with remembrance and almost with how we educate as well. And so there have been some changes recently, which I think are positive. And, this is why it's so important to get kids out to the battlefields with good guides, but again, you're kind of restrained a bit because you hit the same spots, but you can always try your best to kind of shape their understanding to your personal, with your personal touches. But yeah, but then, I suppose at the same time, Woody, there's a whole lot with the Second World War that goes around that is just utter rubbish as well. So
Yeah,
probably just I'm more involved with that history, right? So
it's both, and I think it's complicated, and you know that I live in a world where now I associate myself with people who really know a lot about history and are conveying it very well. And I sometimes forget that the wider public maybe isn't getting access to the same quality information I'm lucky enough to by knowing authors and knowing historians and listening to them to talk about things. And you know, Mag, who goes out on the D-Day beaches, hears some just rubbish said by people and questions by people because they just don't know. Andreas is asking when we'll be at EPA. It'll be about the 19th, 20th, 21st, but we will be very busy, Andreas, but that's about that kind of time we'll be there doing some filming. Dermot Rooney asked a really good question. Who came off worse from popular history, Haig or Montgomery?
Haig? I don't know. Haig's. I feel like there's been a lot of sort of reevaluations and a lot of good work done by revisionist historians in recent times for Haig. So, but I don't really know how that stands. Joe Public in the street, if you stop them, I don't know what they would think. Like, it's quite hard, isn't it? I suppose in a way to answer that.
I think I don't know. I think a lot of people think Haig is Kitchener. I think a lot of people get.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think a lot of moustache thing. I think, and even George V. I think people just get all those kind of people with
the big tashes.
That they're all one person. I mean, they're all. Those two people have both had peaks and troughs since their wars, because, as you said there, the historiography has written that Montgomery, I feel, is on a bit of an upward trajectory.
He's on an up, yeah, definitely.
Haig probably has been on an up. Whether he's leveling out or not, I don't know, because I think because the British historians, I think, were kind of making a case for him, and I think maybe some Australians and Canadians sort of did a case against him. I don't know. That's my
maybe we should have like a board with just like the most controversial kind of leaders and just have like a who's where.
We could do a top 40 like an Alan Freeman voice at the end of it once a week. And moving up to 9th place, Montgomery, who's this been kind of part of this book where he's been told moving down 3 places is Goering. Goering has come down because that would be really. That'd be really interesting. And a new entry this week in the charts is Rommel. We're breaking a new book about Rommel not failing at logistics. That we could do I love it. Let's do it. Charts where we have First World War and Second World War. Then we have a separate First World War and Second World War charts.
Maybe just top 10 though, because top 40. I don't know how long you could sustain doing that.
No, it's but it brings a serious point. Is that any of these questions? What we're saying now, if we were to rewatch this show in 5 years' time, we might go, "Oh my God, it's all changed since then." People who we've been denigrating may have a reevaluation. People are doing that all the time. People are, Patton goes up and down in people's affections, and so do lots of leaders from World War II. So World War I think, is going through that kind of process, and worm moustaches required on World War I commands. It did seem that a lot of them did. Yeah,
that was mandatory. Yeah, confirm
mandatory. If you shaved it off, you couldn't command men. So it is. And it's only more kind of just lighter questions, folks, because they're all very, very serious about things that we will be discussing in future. Matt Johnson makes a comment: historians have to be so patient when dealing with so many myths and false information coming from people who don't know better. And that's, the self-appointed expert is something as YouTubers we have to deal with in the comments sometimes. Brad, who's watching this, Paul Reed, who runs his podcast. There are people out there who think they know lots, and some people do know lots. It's complicated.
I don't, so people have a field day with me. I already put my hand up, and there's loads I don't know. So,
I said I always say this when I ask anything. The shows I enjoy the most are the ones where I go on a massive, great, steep learning curve, and myths I just get busted, and I start things from scratch, going, my God, I didn't know that, or what I knew was completely wrong. That's catnip for me. I love it. I don't want to be just told the same old that I nod along to. I want to be challenged. That's where I am. I think a lot of people are not willing to be challenged. People do get very entrenched in their views, I think. No pun intended with First World War. So Michael is saying, was there a moment that made you want to learn more about the Great War? That's for you, Lucy.
Well, I got into military history really through my granddad, who so Second World War, he fought in Burma. I've been on World War II TV to discuss that. Watch it if you haven't already, because everybody needs to know about the Battle of Hill 170. And from there, really, I just started. Actually, as I said before, it was memoirs that really got me interested in the Great War. I was reading a bunch of Second World War memoirs, and I can't actually remember, but I'm pretty sure it was because things were referenced. You know, actually, this goes back to the whole point of this. I wanted to know what came before. And so, yeah, and I did a bit of work for the British Legion. I started selling poppies after my granddad died, just kind of in his memory. And so it just seemed an obvious kind of route to take, really. So, and then I've just been in the rabbit warren ever since. Haven't been able to find a way out.
It's a labyrinth, isn't it? Once you're in, you can't. It forever controls my destiny now, and I don't care now. I think I went for a point a few years ago where I thought that I was with Normandy. I was getting to a point where there's not much more I can need to know about Normandy. And then I was completely wrong, and I would have got complacent. Then I've admitted now. No, my learning will just keep on going, and that's it. So here's a lighter question from Stuart Burbridge. So Lucy, we know Woody is an Ipswich fan. Who, if anyone, do you support?
Man United. Yeah, and to be fair,
viewing numbers plummet.
Well, no, the thing is, people say, "Oh, but you're not from Manchester." But my defence is, my husband is a lifelong United fan, and he's a Northern. And yes, FA Cup this weekend. Mark's going. I'm not, because we only could get one ticket. Sad times.
Oh.
But you know, it's going to be great to travel up to London with all the train strikes on, just to watch United get smashed. But you know, still.
Well. It's good to have football as well. We did some football chats in San Diego. So Jeff is asking, where do you enjoy finding your research materials, Lucy?
I actually really enjoy going to local, like smaller archives, because often you can get there, you know, much easier. For me, like getting to the National Archives is just a massive ball ache. You know, I've got the Sussex Archives here, those little museums where you can just find those gems, and always worth kind of looking what's around you in your local area, and the regimental museums and things like that. I just find, stuff turns up there. And of course, somewhere I haven't been, where I absolutely should go soon, and I keep promising them I'll go, is Aldershot to the museum of the medical museum there for all the Army Veterinary Corps stuff. I don't know how I managed to get through doing my thesis without actually visiting there, but it's been on my to-do list for a long time.
No, I'm with you with World War II. It's the independent archives and people's individual collections of documents. Obviously, the public records offices and NARA in the States are incredible resources and are an important first place of research. But there are so many other series of documents out there and people's collections, and we're hopefully going to get into the digitization age of more and more stuff being available. And Brian Yee, by the way, is saying, what were your impressions of the San Diego trip? Because I think we ended up asking another question before we asked you. So what did you think of the San Diego trip?
I thought it was awesome. You know, we were only there for a couple of days, but I had a great time, and the conference was brilliant. I can't sit and listen to people talk all day, so we did a bunch of other stuff, which was really cool, history-based things. But I think that the overriding thing was just how friendly and welcoming and lovely everybody was. Like, everybody became it. There wasn't, not that I probably would actually say publicly, you know me, I would be like, there was a few people, but that really wasn't. Everybody was so lovely. It was such a good, positive vibe. And I'll share something with you before. And I haven't actually, I don't know, I might have mentioned this to you actually when we were on the airplane on the way over, but before we went, I was feeling a bit down about stuff, and I was a bit like, I really don't know if I want to maybe take a step back on social media, and I just don't really military history scene's getting me down a bit, and I felt so just reinvigorated after meeting all the people at SMH. I really did. It was awesome.
No, because we had the same conversation, because I wear my hat, I wear my jeans with my turn ups and my boots and stuff. I don't do the suited kind of environment thing, and you and me have an idiosyncratic desire style kind of, and we were made to feel completely not really welcome, and there was all sorts of individuals there with colorful hair and colorful things, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it, so that was good. On that subject, Leslie is asking, what hat is Lucy going to wear to compete with you, Woody? So have you got a hat? Have you got a hat?
Yeah, I have many hats. I can't commit to wearing one for every show, I'm afraid. I might bring one out randomly every now and then. Maybe on like our anniversary show, I'll wear a hat.
I do have one person who notices when I put the old one, because this is my usual streaming hat, because the one I used to stream with is now my going out hat, because it's the one I really like the shape of it when it goes out, because it's kind of, this one blows a bit too much when I go out, but it's good inside. So my other hat is which I used to be my streaming hat, is now my going out hat, but occasionally I wear it for a show and people go, you're wearing your original hat again. And I think, oh blimey, they're noticing which hat I'm wearing, but that's good. And Brian Yee's also, because he knows that I don't like American chocolate. Do you also think that American chocolate sucks?
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's disgusting, isn't it? I think we're all in agreement. All British people are in agreement. American chocolate is awful.
Yeah, Hershey's in the bin.
Yeah, I think there'll be someone who disagrees with us because it's YouTube. There will be someone who'll be getting angry now that we'll lose a subscriber. How dare you?
I don't care. They're wrong. Get out if that's what you think. And by the way, yes, I've seen a couple of comments. We did go to Midway. It was terrific. Midway was fantastic.
Yeah. We love the staff again. The staff, the docents, the volunteers. They were amazing, and they taught us reminded us how they pitched it at different levels. We'd go up and engage them, and they can kind of do you this is the flat bit. The aircraft take over from here and go and kill bad guys, or they can go into really, because we were with Drakenfell, so they were giving us, this section has 74 rivets per yard. Compared to that section has 72, but yeah, that was I learned that how to adapt your presentation to your audience. That was a reminder of that from them, because I'm living in Normandy. I see the same people doing things the same way, and it's nice for me to hear other professionals hear how they do it, because it's people are learning different ways of interpreting history.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, I know saw another one down there. JD of History Underground has the baseball cap. I used to wear baseball caps when I was younger. I feel they don't do anything for me anymore. I feel like I just look like a middle-aged guy trying to cling on to my youth. But I did start wearing them before Pinky Blinders. I wasn't one of those who only started wearing a hat post that. I was wearing a hat of this type before Cillian Murphy. So I'm going to say it there. What other questions have we got? Belgian chocolate being very nice. Yes. We had a question earlier about who has more tattoos, Lucy or Woody. Well, I don't have any, so everyone with one beats me.
Not got a single tattoo.
No. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, actually. When I was very young, my aunt, who's still alive, said, if ever you get a tattoo, she said, it's me and my sister, if ever you get a tattoo, you're out of my will. I think she's relented now, because my sister had 2 or 3 tattoos, but I'm still, maybe I'm going to get all of it. So I'm not going to risk it now.
For being in like the rockabilly scene, it's quite unusual. I don't know,
it's not. No, as we go off this, it's not because I have any problem with having ink on my body. I would change my mind halfway through the design, and then I would change it again, and I would go, oh shit. I have these ideas. I think, oh, that'd be really good. And then a day later, I've changed my mind again. That'd be if I could have a tattoo that I could wear for 2 years, then change other, that would be great.
Not going to get a World War II TV tattoo then?
No. I do. There is a viewer who had one done.
Stop it.
No, he had the logo done.
What? That's amazing.
Alongside the tattoo of Indy Nidell's channel as well, the Great War. So he had several tattoos on his arm, I think, of his favorite channels.
Aren't people's life choices interesting? Some might say that about my tattoos, to be fair. But
yeah, I mean, yeah. So the guy, and that's who it is. It's one of those guys. I don't know who it is because he uses his username. It's like something 23798. I don't know who he is. But he said that he has tattoos, and I didn't ask for photographic evidence. I trusted him.
Oh, I think you need to go back and we need to see
I see him. It could be a her. I don't know. Now I'm questioning myself. But yeah, and we can have a henna tattoo. Apparently, there we are. So we're going off into other questions now. Has Woody ever visited Trouville in Normandy? Love the Eugene Baudin paintings of the place. Yes, I have visited Trouville, and I do go to places in Normandy that aren't World War II. I'm interested in kind of Knights Templar. I've been to some of those places. There's a place down near towards Brittany, which is the seat of one of the Templar Knights, whose name I can't remember. He was one of the characters in that Templar Knights series on ITV about 3 or 4 years ago, beginning with S. I can't think what it was. Anyway, not something. Anyway, there's his ancestral home is in us. I like that kind of stuff, but not well enough to remember the details. But yeah, so. Yeah, someone having a Mark Felton tattoo. My World War II nemesis. My God.
Can you imagine if you were drunk and you woke up with that?
Yeah, no. So the questions were very serious at the beginning. Now they've gone a bit silly.
It descended into nonsense. That's my sweet spot.
This is a side, but I love the banter you have going. And that actually, to bring it back to serious, is this. There are some purveyors of history on YouTube where the seriousness never lets up. It just is all about learning, and that's great. But I like the fact some of the shows that people like the most on World War II TV are when it's someone who's an old pal of mine, and we have a little bit of jokes. I mean, because when Kevin Hemel comes on and talks about Patton, I will throw in anti-Patton jokes, and I got a long comment saying, "You're very negative. You can't say anti-Patton stuff to a person who's written books about General Patton." I go, "No, but he's my mate. I'm doing it because he makes jokes about Montgomery to me, because it's what we do." So.
It's pattern patter. That's what it is.
Pattern patter. Yeah, I'll try and say that after. But I think it's important that people still feel that World War I TV, like World War II TV, is a kind of friendly, safe environment, like chatting in a pub, as you said at the beginning.
Yeah, and also that's kind of just me. I mean, and it's the same with you. I can't be something I'm not. So.
Well, someone said Brad has a good question, but now I can't see. I can't scroll back and find Brad's question. Brad has a good. Phil's saying Brad has a good question, but I'm scrolling back and I can't see. Brad, ask your question again. I can't see it. It was so far. I'm scrolling back. I'm scrolling back. I can't see it. Ask it again, Brad.
It's just a lot about chocolate.
Is it still about chocolate? It could be. Well, we'll find out. Here from Scott Grimmett. Any plans to cover of Canadian cavalry and support units, cavalry or Canadian motor machine gun brigades?
Yes, if you want. Yeah. Yes, I mean this is going to be the answer to any plans to cover. ... Yes is the answer.
Yeah, no, yeah. Again, of course, like with the questions tonight, we can't cover everything instantly. I mean, I get lots of comments saying, "Have you covered so and so?" I go, "Yeah, it's on the list." But sometimes it will be a long time before that subject makes it to the top of the list, and that's with me doing a lot of content. But yes, eventually. I mean, the point is, there's enough material to keep going indefinitely, and then if you get to the end, go back and restart it all again with the new historiography, the new versions. I think really.
Well, yeah, because I think one of the things to sort of remember is the events that happened, but history itself is always changing. Historiography, we are constantly reviewing things. Constantly, people have different ideas, different theories. Finding out new things, exploring old things. That never ends. So I'm up for kind of as much or as little of anything that people want, and particularly anything to do with cavalry. I'm automatically there, both feet in. So yeah. Okay.
So Andreas is asking, will the shows run along the World War I timeline or more randomly?
No, randomly, not along a timeline. They'll just be. As I said, we're going to try and link in maybe with World War II TV where we can on things, but yeah, they won't be chronological, because I actually think there's not a lot to be gained from looking at history that way. Sometimes it's better to mix it up, because you kind of come at things from a slightly different perspective. Plus, there are some amazing, great resources out there on YouTube already. Who have done that.
Sheldrake is asking, hi, David, any plans to do First World War live streams from battlefields of First World War sites in the UK or indeed France? Well, possibly. I mean, as you'll ask us anything, this is obviously World War II TV viewers. The live streams I was doing at the beginning of World War II TV were based on the fact that I had people available to go out there with their phones and film stuff because there was nothing else to do because there were no tours because it was lockdown. So Mag and Colin and Duncan were. Now Colin has just started 12 days in a row working, having had 2 days off after 10 days working. So the last thing I say to Colin is, can you go out in the evening and do 2 hours standing around at a site with your phone up and do footage for me? So it's about finding people, isn't it? I mean, the live streams are great, but they require a lot of planning and things can go badly wrong as well. So I think the good thing about using the StreamYard is that, okay, we have the odd technical problem, is that they function. So what are your feelings about doing live stuff on battlefields, Lucy?
I don't know. I think there are probably one of those things that there are some really great stuff out there. You know, I do virtual battlefield tours for Battle Guide virtual tours, and that's a great way to kind of, you know, get a perspective of the battlefields and a lot of drone footage and things like that. If you're not in the country, or you can't get to the battlefields. I think it would depend, you know, if the opportunity comes up, and, you know, I head over to the Western Front quite a lot, and, you know, if there's an opportunity there ad hoc, then definitely. So it's not like closed off, but I think predominantly we could be sticking to the kind of format that World War II TV has now, rather than maybe back when you started.
Well, in fact, yeah, and I don't think we addressed that in the launch shows, is that I had Dan Hill, who you do your Battle Guide stuff with, and he's a mutual friend of ours. I was in the pub with Dan the other week, and he's putting a lot of investment of tech and kit into what he's doing with you and other presenters, and it's fantastic. But World War II TV and World War it's retro. It's just people coming on with PowerPoints, and retro never goes out of date because retro is already retro. I mean, sometimes when people send me the PowerPoint, I go, that it looks like it was done in 1973, you know. I go, it's great. Doesn't matter. It's about the information. I've never had a single email or comment about anybody saying the PowerPoint was a bit basic, or, you know, that font was so 1986. People are interested in the content, and I think if the format is a guest coming on, talking live with a few images and a PowerPoint, it can't go wrong. It can't go out of date. I guess you're on the same page with that, are you, Lucy?
Yeah, it's all about the conversation, isn't it? Like we said, it's all about going on this journey, learning, getting interesting people on, and having those discussions and putting those questions to them and that kind of thing. And I don't like over promising stuff and under delivering. That's like my worst. That's like my personal hell. I would much rather do what I know works and make sure we nail it than promising you the moon on a stick and then delivering like, you know, some old tat. So yeah, that's kind of my view. But, you know, as I said, if it happens that we're out there and there's an opportunity arises, then there might be some specials. But I think the format that World War II TV has now, it works, and it works for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and some people do use Comic Sans, David. It's fine. The last thing I'm going to say is we are going to be, you have set up a Patreon account for WW1TV, and we will get the information about that out to people in the next, you know, some time. We're working on more things. So there's no content actually scheduled right now on the channel, but we're working on that now. So keep up with the subscriptions. Thank you, everybody, from both of us for getting us to over 1,300 subscribers. We need also people to watch the content. We've got to hit that 4,000 hours of viewing time to break through the next threshold to get the whistles and bells and the functionality on YouTube. So that'd be really great. But we will keep you posted about what we're doing. So, Lucy, what's your next kind of mission for World War I TV? Just going out there and brushing up your contacts list and looking at your Rolodex?
Yeah, exactly. Getting my Rolodex out, seeing who I haven't annoyed accidentally, and seeing who we can get on, and yeah, just planning some good content. I'm going to start by looking at things that I'm interested in, and you know, that I think would be, because I think that's the best way, right? Look at the things that you've always wanted to know. That's quite selfish of me, but I presume if I want to know it, then probably other people will. Yeah. And then looking forward to our little trip that we've got out planned to Ypres, and getting a bit of content together there as well with JD and yourself.
Yeah, having a beer and chatting more about the future. And it's great, as Ghost Wheel is saying. Chieftain's PowerPoint is him pointing at a book in his hand and saying, "Can you see that?" And the Chieftain is Nicholas is an absolute legend on YouTube. So yeah, he literally just holds a book up and goes, "Can you see that? Can you see that?" and points at something, which is so it works. It is ultimately, Bradley's the same. It's about the content. If the content is good, if you're saying something that's worth listening to, then the style of it, I think, really doesn't matter. So we will bring things to an end. So we will actually watch this again. I can't wait to have our next chat. But Lucy, any final words before we close this one?
No, just a big thank you to everybody for your thoughts, suggestions, comments, and just for joining us and yeah, just being here. Really, it's really been really nice.
Brilliant. Okay, so this is Paul and Lucy saying good evening, or wherever you are around the world. We will see you all again shortly. Thanks for watching and thanks for your questions. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.